Hi, everybody. A little experiment I wanted to do is to basically read this book that I found very interesting. I've heard of this book before years ago, and we've all heard of these legends, But what's interesting about this book is it's apparently not fiction. It's claimed to be a real life tale, fact. It's called The Smoky God, or A Voyage Journey to the Inner Earth. A playlist I'm going to read section by section. I think there's 7 parts. I'll read the author's foreword. That'll be one video, and then each of these will be separate videos, and maybe a wrap-up video or something like that. It's a book presented as a true account written by Willis George Emerson. He heard the account from the 2 people that encountered it, or actually one of the 2, and describes the adventures of Olaf Jansen, a Norwegian sailor who sailed with his father to the entrance to the Earth's interior at the North Pole. Yeah, I know. That's a pretty fantastic tale right there. For 2 years, Jansen lived with the inhabitants of an underground network of colonies who Emerson writes were 12 feet tall and whose world was lit by a smoky central sun. Their capital city was said to be the original Garden of Eden, which, as a believer, that really perked my interest. Later works by the other authors, such as Agartha, Secrets of the Subterranean Cities, have identified the civilization Jansen encountered with Agartha, a mythical subterranean city, although Emerson did not use that name. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. I thought the same. I think it's important to have inquiring minds, particularly in this day and age. Think outside the box. Personally, I do so in prayer to help guide me on the right direction, or in the right direction. We'll likely never have solid answers to a lot of these questions, at least maybe not in our day and age. Yet with that said, maybe do some research before you go further with this book. For instance, what's interesting is that the Buddhist monks actually, or the Buddhists, believe in a hollow earth. They believe in this mythical kingdom. And you read about it, they're into the honeycombed earth, which is interesting because at the Vatican you'll find a lot of stuff about honeycombs and bees and all that, a lot of symbolism, a lot of statues and things like that. But nonetheless, it's a very interesting point that the Buddhists believe in this, and they say that one of the 3 portals or entrances down to the this world is one in the Himalayas under the very large Buddhist monk capital, I guess you'd say, a huge building they have there, and of course the North and the South Poles. Interesting article I found here, Atlas Obscura, why the Soviets sponsored a doomed expedition to a hollow earth kingdom. And there's a lot more if you search around. But what's interesting is this whole hollow earth started with Edmund Halley, the finder of Halley's Comet. In 1692, Halley put forth the idea of a hollow earth consisting of a shell of about 500 miles thick. So it's very interesting. Mainstream academic back in the day. And there's much more, but one that really stands out to me is the tales of Admiral Byrd, who also was put into eventually an insane asylum to silence him. And although there's interviews on the internet with him, check it out. But he was a literal polar explorer, and he led a fleet that went and finally attacked what was basically, they say, Antarctica with the remnants of the Nazi regime. Yeah, basically he lost the battle so badly that he said they had weapons that were unconceivable, that were out of this world, never seen them before. Anyway, you should really look into him. He's a real, admiral, very interesting background, and his son also swears by his father's account, and there's a lot of information on it. Last but not least, there's a great there's a great History Channel video on YouTube, which sort of summarizes a lot of these different ideas. There's a lot more on YouTube you could find on this hollow earth idea or theory. So without further ado, It's over on Project Gutenberg, gutenberg.org. You can see this book can be used anywhere at no cost, no restrictions. And I'm simply going to read it. I'll add some commentary along the way at times. I'll, only if relevant. What's important to note is that this book is from 1908. So it was written at the turn of the last century. I mean, it was way back there, of course. It's more than 100 years old. The Smoky God, or A Voyage to the Inner World. He is the God who sits in the center on the navel of the earth. He is the interpreter of religion to all mankind. That's Plato. Part 1, Author's Foreword. I fear the seemingly incredible story which I am about to relate will be regarded as a result of a distorted intellect super-induced possibly by the glamour of unveiling a marvelous mystery rather than a truthful record of the unparalleled experiences related by one Olaf Jansen, whose eloquent madness so appealed to my imagination that all thought of an analytical criticism has been effectually dispelled. Marco Polo will doubtless shift uneasily in his grave at the strange story I'm called upon to chronicle. A story as strange as a Munchausen tale. It is also incongruous that I, a disbeliever, should be the one to edit the story of Olaf Jansen, whose name is now, for the first time, given to the world. Yet, we must hereafter rank as one of the notables of Earth. I freely confess his statements admit of no rational analysis, but have to do with the profound mystery concerning the frozen Earth that for centuries has claimed the attention of scientists and laymen alike. However much they are at variance with the cosmographical manuscripts of the past, these plain statements may be relied upon as a record of the things Olaf Jansen claims to have seen with his own eyes. 100 times I have asked myself whether it's possible that the world's geography is incomplete and that the startling narrative of Olaf Jansen is predicated upon demonstrable facts. The reader may be able to answer these queries to his own satisfaction, however far the chronicler of this narrative may be from having reached a conviction. Yet sometimes even I am at loss to know whether I have been led away from an abstract truth by the ignis fatui of a clever superstition, or whether heretofore accepted facts are, after all, founded upon fallacy. It may be that the true home of Apollo was not at Delphia, but in the outer earth center of which Plato speaks, where he says Apollo's realm home is among the Hyperboreans, in a land of perpetual life where mythology tells us two doves flying from the two opposite ends of the world met in this fair region, the home of Apollo. Indeed, according to Hecatoius, Leto, the mother of Apollo, was born on an island in the Arctic Ocean, far beyond the North Wind. It is not my intention, I'm going to come back to that point in a moment here, it's not my intention to attempt discussion of the theology of the deities, nor the cosmology of the world. My simple duty is to enlighten the world concerning a heretofore unknown portion of the universe as it was seen described by the Old Norseman Olaf Jansen. Interest in Northern research is international. 11 nations are engaged in or have contributed to the perilous work of trying to solve Earth's one remaining cosmological mystery. There is a saying, ancient as the hills, that truth is stranger than fiction. We've seen that the last, 20 years. And in most startling manner has this axiom been brought home to me within the last fortnight. It was just 2 o'clock in the morning when I was aroused from restful sleep by the vigorously ringing of my doorbell. The untimely disturber proved to be a messenger bearing a note, scrawled almost to the point of illegibility, from an old Norseman by the name of Olaf Jansen. After much deciphering, I made out the writing, which simply said, "Am ill unto death. Come." The call was imperative, and I lost no time in making ready to comply. Perhaps I may as well explain here that Olaf Jansen, a man who quite recently celebrated his 95th birthday, has for the last half-dozen years been living alone in an unpretentious bungalow out Glendale Way, a short distance from the business district of Los Angeles, California. It was less than 2 years ago, out walking one afternoon, that I was attracted by Olaf Jansen's house and its home-like surroundings toward its owner and occupant, whom I afterward came to know as a believer in the ancient worship of Odin and Thor. There was a gentleness in his face and a kindly expression in the keen, alert, gray eyes of this man who had lived more than 80 years and 10, and withal a sense of loneliness that appealed to my sympathy. Slightly stopped, and with his hand clasped behind him, he walked back and forth with slow, measured tread that day when first we met. I can hardly say what particular motive impelled me to pause in my walk and engage him in conversation. He seemed pleased when I complimented him on the attractiveness of his bungalow and on the well-tended vines and flowers clustered in profusion over its windows, roof, and wide piazza. I soon discovered that my new acquaintance was no ordinary person, but one profound and learned to a remarkable degree, a man who, in the latter years of his long life, had dug deeply into books and become strong in the power of meditative silence. I encouraged him to talk and soon gathered that he had resided only 6 or 7 years in Southern California, but he had passed a dozen years prior in one of the Middle Eastern states. Before that, he had been a fisherman off the coast of Norway in the region of Lofton Islands, from whence he had made trips still farther north to Spitsbergen and even the Franz Josef Land. When I started to take my leave, he seemed reluctant to have me go and asked me to come again. Although at the time I thought nothing of it, I remember now that he made a peculiar remark as I extended my hand in leave-taking. "You will come again?" he asked. "Yes, you will come again someday. I am sure you will, and I shall show you my library and tell you many things of which you have never dreamed, things so wonderful that it may be you will not believe me." I laughed, assured him that I would not only come again, but would be ready to believe whatever he might choose to tell me of his travels and adventures. In the days that followed, I became well acquainted with Olaf Jansen, and little by little he told me his story, so marvelous that its very daring challenges reason and belief. The old Norseman also expressed himself with so much earnestness and sincerity that I became enthralled by his strange narrations. Then came the messenger's call that night. Within the hour I was at Olaf Jansen's bungalow. He was very impatient at the long wait, although after being summoned I had come immediately to his bedside. "I must hasten," he explained, while yet he held my hand in greeting. "I have much to tell you that you know not, and I will trust no one but you. I fully realize," he went on hurriedly, "that I shall not survive the night. The time has come to join my fathers in the great sleep." I adjusted the pillows to make him more comfortable and assured him I was glad to be able to serve him in any way possible, for I was beginning to realize the seriousness of his condition. The lateness of the hour, the stillness of the surroundings, the uncanny feeling of being alone with the dying man, together with his weird story, all combined to make my heart beat fast and loud with a feeling which I have no name. Indeed, there were many times that night by the old Norseman's couch, and there have been many times since, when a sensation rather than a conviction took possession of my very soul, and I seemed not only to believe in, but actually see the strange lands, the strange people, and the strange world of which he told, and to hear the mighty orchestral chorus of a thousand lusty voices. For over 2 hours he seemed endowed with almost superhuman strength, talking rapidly and to all appearances rationally. Finally he gave into my hands certain data, drawings, and crude maps. "These," said he in conclusion, "I leave in your hands. If I can have your promise to give them to the world, I shall die happily, because I desire that people may know the truth, for then all mystery concerning the frozen Northland will be explained. There is no chance of your suffering the fate I suffered. They will not put you in irons, nor confine you in a madhouse, because you're not telling your own story, but mine, and I, thanks to the gods Odin and Thor, will be in my grave, and so beyond the reach of disbelievers who would persecute. Without a thought of the far-reaching results the promise entailed, or foresee the many sleepless nights which obligation has since brought me, I gave my hand, and with it a pledge to discharge faithfully his dying wish. As the sun rose over the peaks of the San Joaquin far to the east-west, the spirit of Olaf Jansen, the navigator, the explorer, the worshipper of Odin and Thor, the man whose experiences and travels, as related, are without a parallel in all the world's history, passed away, and I was left alone with the dead. And now, after having paid the last sad rites to this strange man from the Lofton Islands, and the still farther northward Ho, the courageous explorer of frozen regions, who in his declining years, after he had passed the 40 mark, had sought an asylum, a restful peace in sun-favored California, I will undertake to make public his story. But, first of all, let me indulge in one or two reflections. Generation follows generation, and the traditions from the misty past are handed down from sire to son. But for some strange reason, interest in the ice-locked unknown does not abate with the receding years, either in the minds of the ignorant or the tutored. With each new generation, a restless impulse stirs the hearts of men to capture the veiled citadel of the Arctic, the circle of silence, the land of glaciers, cold wastes of waters, and winds that are strangely warm. Increasing interest is manifest in the mountainous icebergs, and marvelous speculations are indulged in concerning the Earth's center of gravity, the cradle of the tides, where the whales have their nurseries, where the magnetic needle goes mad, where the aurora borealis illumines the night, and where brave and courageous spirits of every generation dare to venture and explore, defying the dangers of the farthest north. One of the ablest works of recent years is Paradise Found, or The Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole, by William F. Warren. In this carefully prepared volume, Mr. Warren almost stubbed his toe against the real truth, but missed it seemingly by only a hair's breadth, if the old Norseman's revelation be true. Dr. Orville Livingston Leach, scientist, in a recent article says, "The possibilities of a land inside the Earth were first brought to my attention when I picked up a geode of the shores of the Great Lakes. The geode is a spherical and apparently solid stone, but when broken is found to be hollow and coated with crystals." Yeah, I think I got one. Let's see, where have I got? Well, I got a couple of them, but here's one right here, So, you pop it open and it's hollow and filled with crystals. The geode is spherical and apparently solid stone, but when broken is found to be hollow and coated with crystals. The Earth is only a larger form of a geode, and the law that created the geode in its hollow form undoubtedly fashioned the Earth in the same way. In presenting the theme of this almost incredible story as told by Olaf Jansen, supplemented by manuscript maps and crude drawings entrusted to me, a fitting introduction is found in the following quotation. "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void. And also, God created man in his own image. Therefore, even in things material, man must be God-like, because he is created in the likeness of the Father. A man builds a house for himself and family." We'll come back to this after this section. "A man builds a house for himself and his family. The porches or verandas are all without and are secondary. The building is really constructed for the conveniences within. Olaf Jansen makes this startling announcement through me, a humble instrument, that in like manner God created the earth for the within, that is to say, for its lands, seas, rivers, mountains, forests, and valleys, and for its other internal conveniences, while the outside surface of the earth is merely the veranda, the porch, where things grow by comparison, but sparsely, like the lichen on the mountainside, clinging detrimentally for bare existence, determinedly for bare existence. Take an eggshell, and from each end break out a piece as large as the end of this pencil. Extract its contents, and you will have a perfect representation of Olaf Jansen's Earth. The distance from the inside surface to the outside surface, according to him, is about 300 miles. The center of gravity is not in the center of the Earth, but in the center of the shell or crust. Therefore, if the thickness of the Earth's crust or shell is 300 miles, the center of gravity is 150 miles below the surface. In their logbooks, Arctic explorers tell us that the dipping of the needle as the vessel sails in regions of the farthest north known. In reality, they are at the curve, or on the edge of the shell, where gravity is geometrically increased, while the electric current seemingly dashes off into space toward the phantom idea of the North Pole. Yet this same electric current drops again and continues its course southward along the inside surface of the Earth's crust. In the appendix to his work, Captain Sabine gives an account of experiments to determine the acceleration of the pendulum in different latitudes. This appears to have resulted from the joint labor of Perley and Sabine. He says, the accidental discovery that a pendulum, being removed from Paris to the neighborhood of the equator, increased its time of vibration, gave the first step to our present knowledge that the polar axis of the globe is less than the equatorial, that the forces of gravity at the surface of the Earth increase progressively from the equator toward the poles. Wow, yeah. According to Olaf Jansen, in the beginning, this old world of ours was created solely for the within world, where are located the four great rivers, the Euphrates, the Pison, the Gihon, and the Hiddekel. These same names of rivers, which apply to the streams on the outside surface of the earth, are purely traditional from an antiquity beyond the memory of man. On the top of the high mountain, near the fountainhead of these four rivers, Olaf Jansen, the Norseman, claims to have discovered the long-lost Garden of Eden, the veritable navel of the earth, and to have spent over 2 years studying the reconnoitering of this marvelous within land, exuberant with stupendous plant life and abounding in giant animals, a land where the people live to be centuries old, after the order of Masula and other biblical characters, a region where 1/4 of the inner surface is water and 3/4 land, where there are large oceans and many rivers and lakes, where the cities are superlative in construction and magnificence, where modes of transportation are as far in advance of ours, and with our boasted achievements are in advance of the inhabitants of the darkest Africa. The distance directly across the space from the inner surface to the inner surface is about 600 miles, less than the recognized diameter of the Earth. And the identical center of this vast vacuum is the seat of the electricity, a mammoth ball of dull red fire, not startlingly brilliant, but surrounded by a white, mild, luminous cloud giving out uniform warmth and held in its place in the center of this eternal space by the immutable law of gravitation. This electrical cloud is known to the people within as the abode of the Smoky God. They believe it to be the throne of the Most High. Olaf Jansen reminded me of how, in the old college days, we were all familiar with the laboratory demonstrations of centrifugal motion, which clearly proved that if the Earth were a solid, the rapidity of its revolution upon its axis would tear it into 1,000 fragments. The old Norseman has maintained that from the farthest points of the land of the islands of Spitzbergen and Franz Josef Land, flocks of geese may be seen annually flying still farther northward, just as the sailors and explorers record in their logbooks. No scientist has yet been audacious enough to attempt to explain, even to his own satisfaction, toward what lands these winged fowls are guided by their subtle instinct. However, Olaf Jansen has given us a most reasonable explanation. The presence of the open sea in the Northland is also explained. Olaf Jansen claims that the northern aperture intake, or hole, so to speak, is about 1,400 miles across. In connection with this, let us read what explorer Nansen writes on page 288 of his book, "I have never had such a splendid sail, on to the north, steadily north, with a good wind, as fast as steam and sail can take us, an open sea mile after mile, watch after watch, through these unknown regions, always clearer and clearer of ice. One might almost say, how long will it last? The eye always turns to the northward as one paces the bridge. It is gazing into the future, but there is always the same dark sky ahead, which means open sea." Again, the Norwood Review of England, in its issue of May 10, 1884, says, "We do not admit that there is ice up to the pole. Once inside the great ice barrier, a new world breaks upon the explorer. The climate is mild like that of England, and afterward balmy as the Greek Isles." Some of the rivers within, Olaf Jansen claims, are larger than our Mississippi and Amazon rivers combined. In point of volume of water carried, indeed their greatness is occasioned by their width and depth rather than their length. And it is at the mouths of these mighty rivers, as they flow northward and southward along the inside surface of the earth, that mammoth icebergs are found, some of them 15 and 20 miles wide, and from 40 to 100 miles in length. Is it not strange that there has never been an iceberg encountered either in the Arctic or Antarctic Ocean that is not composed of fresh water? Modern scientists claim that freezing eliminates the salt, but Olaf Jansen claims differently. Ancient Hindu, Japanese, and Chinese writings, as well as the hieroglyphics of the extinct races of the North American continent, all speak of the custom of sun worshipping, and it is possible, in the starting light of Olaf Jansen's revelations, that the people of the inner world, lured away by glimpses of the sun as it shone upon the inner surface of the earth, either from the northern or the southern opening, became dissatisfied with the Smoky God, the great pillar or mother cloud of electricity, and weary of their continuously mild and pleasant atmosphere, followed the brighter light and were finally led beyond the ice belt and scattered over the outer surface of the earth, through Asia, Europe, North America, and later Africa, Australia, and South America. There's a quick remark there. The following quotation is significant. It follows that man, issuing from a mother region still undetermined, but which a number of considerations indicate to have been in the north, has radiated in several directions, that his migrations have been constantly from north to south. In M. La Marquis de la Saporta in Popular Science Monthly, October 1883, page 753. Go find that in your library. Okay. It is a notable fact that as we approach the equator, the structure of the human race grows less. But the Patagonians of South America are probably the only aborigines from the center of the earth who came out through the aperture usually designated as a south pole, and they are called the giant race. Olaf Jansen affirms that in the beginning the world was created by the great architect of the universe, so that the man might dwell upon its inside surface, which has ever since been the habitation of the chosen. They were driven out of the Garden of Eden brought their traditional history with them. The history of the people living within contains a narrative suggesting the story of Noah and the ark with which we are familiar. He sailed away, as did Columbus, from a certain port to a strange land he had heard of far to the northward, carrying with him all manner of beasts in the fields and fowls of the air, but was never heard of afterward. On the southern boundaries of Alaska, and still more frequently on the Siberian coast, are found boneyards containing tusks of ivory in quantity so great as to suggest the burying places of antiquity from Olaf Janssen's account. They have come from the great prolific animal life that abounds in the fields and forests on the banks of the numerous rivers of the inner world. The materials were caught in the ocean currents, or carried on ice floes, and have accumulated like driftwood on the Siberian coast. This has been going on for ages, and hence these mysterious boneyards. On this subject, William F. Warren, in his book already cited, pages 297 and 298, says, "The Arctic rocks tell of a lost Atlantis more wonderful than Plato's. The fossil ivory beds of Siberia excel everything of the kind in the world. From the days of Pliny, at least, they have constantly been undergoing exploitation, and still they are in the chief quarters of supply. The remains of mammoths are so abundant that, as Agartha says, the northern island of Siberia seemed built up on crowded bones." Another scientific writer, speaking of the islands of New Siberia, north of the mouth of the river Lena, uses this language: "Large quantities of ivory are dug out of the ground every year. Indeed, some of the islands are believed to be nothing but an accumulation of drift timber and the bodies of mammoths and other, I can't say that word, antediluvian animals frozen together. From this, we may infer that during the years that have elapsed since the Russian conquest of Siberia, useful tusks from more than 20,000 mammoths have been collected." But now for the story of Olaf Jansen. Wow, that was just like the intro. I give it in detail, as he set down by himself in manuscript and woven into the tale, just as he placed them, are certain quotations from recent works on Arctic exploration, showing how carefully the old Norseman compared with his own experiences those of other voyages to the frozen north. Thus wrote the disciple of Odin and Thor. And we'll go into part 2, Olaf Jansen's story, in the next video, and I'll make a playlist of this, and they'll all be in the playlist. Let's just touch on these quotes right here. Obviously, this is starting with, in the beginning, God created. And that's obviously Genesis 1:1. And this is the Scriptures 2009, where they replace God with the proper Hebrew Elohim, and the proper names of God. So just so you know. In the beginning, that would be God. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And the earth came to be, the earth became formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the spirit of Elohim, was moving on the face of the waters. And then verse 3 says, Elohim said, let light come to be, and light came to be. Elohim saw the light, and it was good, and Elohim separated the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And it came to be evening, and it came to be morning one day. Verse 6 says, and Elohim said, let an expanse come to be in the midst of the waters. And it separated the waters from the waters. And Elohim made the expanse and separated the waters which were under the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And it came to be so. And Elohim called the expanse heavens. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning the second day. Verse 9, and Elohim said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear. And it came to be so. Elohim called the dry land earth, and the collections of the waters he called seas, and Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth grass, plant that yields seed, and the tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seeds in itself on the earth, and it came to be so. And it goes on and so forth. So, I mean, it's quite clear. It's different. You can't take just one verse out of context here. It goes on, God created man in his own image. Now that goes into Genesis 1 as well. There's two creation stories, Genesis 1 and in Genesis 2. And in Genesis 1, verse 27, and Elohim created the man in his image. In the image of Elohim, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So, very interesting. Verse 2, chapter 2 of Genesis. Right, and here it says in verse 7 of chapter 2 of Genesis, and Yehovah Elohim formed the man out of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils breath of lives, and the man became a living being. And Yehovah Elohim planted a garden in Eden to the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground Yehovah Elohim made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, and with the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden. And from there it divided and became 4 heads. The name of the first is Pison, and this surrounding this entire land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of the land is good. Bdellium is there, and the Sholem stone. The name of the second river is Gihon, and the one surrounding the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is Hindkel, and that one which goes to the east of Ashur. The fourth river is Euphrates. And Yehovah Elohim took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work and to guard it. Now, we can go further in this, but this is rather interesting when you read chapter 2 now. And I've always been amazed there's actually 2 creation stories, chapter 1 of Genesis and chapter 2. There's a lot of theories about that. And of course, Satan and evil enters into this whole picture. That's very clear. That's the curse we all have, the original sin. Now, therefore, even in things material, man must be God-like because he is created in the likeness of the Father. Yeah, indeed. We also have a terrible sin, and because of Jesus, Son of God, our Savior, we have hope. But in any event, that's for another video. Now, what's interesting is he mentioned rivers here. According to the world are located the 4 great rivers, just like in chapter 2 of Genesis. The Euphrates, just like said, the Pison, and the Gihon, and the Hindkel. You know, the people in the Old Testament did live for incredible long amounts of years, like mentioned here. And there are a lot of other things we could fact check. For instance, okay, we're going to get back to this part here about these men of renowned men of past, which he discusses there. But in Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. You do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of that which is in the heavens above, or which is in the earth below, or which is in the waters under the earth. You do not bow down to them, nor serve them, for I, Yehovah, your Elohim, am a jealous God, visiting the crookedness of the fathers and the children to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me. Very interesting. And we go back to Genesis again. Cain gets cursed Where they use the old names. And Cain killed Abel, and then Yehovah, God, Elohim says, and now you are cursed from the earth, in verse 11 of Genesis 4. And now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. If you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. And Cain said to Yehovah, my punishment is too great to bear. See, you have driven me from the face of the ground today, and I am hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and it shall be that anyone who finds me kills me. You have driven me from the face of the ground today. It's interesting one right there. This says on the earth. We look at another translation, for instance, New International Version. We go to verse. But see, this is how they replace in all the King James and subsequent Bibles they use. But the Lord said to him, but Yehovah Elohim said to him, not so. We have a Septuagint Hebrew very well. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. Then Yehovah put a mark on Cain, so that no one who found him would kill him. Well, start back here. Cain said to Yehovah, my punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth. And of course, we go on to read like in Revelation 17:8, the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up out of the pit of the deep and goes to destruction, and those dwelling on the earth. So you see that there's stuff down below. That's quite clear. Now, whether it's the good stuff or the bad stuff, definitely some bad stuff down there. But there could be different realms down there. It's hard to say, but in any event, it's very interesting. And one last thing. Oh yeah, the minute. So look at. Let me see if I can find that real quick. If we go to Genesis 6, a lot in Genesis today. Now, the Bible talks about giants. That's clear. Numerous places in the Bible. There was different races of giants, and the giants were largely eradicated in the flood. There was flood, but some survived, some escaped, and some are, could apparently still be here in one form, shape, or the other. Some theorize, perhaps, in the center of the earth, if there is such a thing. Sorry, Genesis 6. And Yehovah said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever in his going astray. He is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. It's verse 3 of Genesis 6. Verse 4, the Nephilim, these are giants. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of Elohim came in the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of name. And if you look at other translations. They were the heroes of old, men of renown, like, the legendary figures of Greek mythology, the men of renown. These Nephilim were larger, stronger, more powerful than what we are. They're literal fallen angels. So that's kind of interesting, this part here. There'd be some more fact checking to do on some of these things about geese flying north and stuff like that. Kind of interesting. If true or not, I don't know. But nonetheless, interesting foreword. Get you going. And what I like about this is that they, it's a supposed true tale. Whether it is or not, I don't know. But okay, so that was the first section. I'll set up the playlist, and stay tuned for the next section, the part 2, Olaf Jansen's story. All right, have a good day.